No one wakes up and decides to ignore you. It doesn't happen dramatically. There's no announcement, no confrontation. It happens quietly. You're still in the room, still speaking, still involved. But your words stop carrying weight. People nod, but don't act. They respond, but don't engage. They listen, but don't remember. And the most dangerous part? You often don't notice when it starts. Being ignored isn't about intelligence. It's not about status, and it's rarely about looks. It's about behavior, small patterns that quietly teach people they don't need to take you seriously. You can be competent, you can be knowledgeable, you can even be right, and still become background noise. Why? Because attention follows presence, and presence is shaped by restraint, clarity, and control. When those disappear, so does impact. Most people who get ignored make the same mistake. They try to compensate with more words. They talk longer, explain more, repeat themselves, add context no one asked for. They believe visibility creates importance. It doesn't, it creates fatigue. The more you try to secure attention, the less valuable your words feel. People instinctively value what feels limited. When your speech feels unlimited, your influence shrinks. Another behavior that makes you easy to ignore is reacting too quickly. Fast responses signal eagerness. Eagerness signals imbalance. When you rush to reply, clarify, or defend your point, you teach others that your position depends on their reaction. Strong presence doesn't chase responses. It sets tone. Ignored people often think they need to be louder. But volume doesn't create authority. Control does. Control over timing, control over delivery, control over emotion. When you lack that control, people sense instability. And humans don't anchor themselves to instability. They move past it. This video isn't about being silent, and it's not about becoming distant. It's about identifying the behaviors that quietly lower your social weight. Because once you see them, you can remove them. And when you remove them, the shift is immediate. In the next part, we'll break down the first behavior that makes you invisible in conversations, even when you're speaking. The first behavior that makes you easy to ignore is talking too much. Not because you're boring, not because you lack value, but because you remove scarcity. When you speak without restraint, your words stop feeling important. People don't consciously think, "He talks too much." They feel something else. They feel that nothing you say is final, that there's always more coming, more explanation, more context, more clarification. And when there's always more, none of it feels urgent. The most respected people don't speak at length. They speak with precision. They make a point. They stop. And that pause forces attention. Overtalkers don't allow space. They fill it. They answer before being asked. They explain before being challenged. They clarify before confusion even appears. This doesn't signal confidence. It signals discomfort with silence. And silence is where presence is tested. If you rush to fill every gap, people assume you need the gap filled, which means you need reassurance, which means your words aren't settled, and people don't anchor themselves to unsettled energy. Another mistake overtalkers make is repeating themselves. They rephrase the same point 3 different ways, thinking repetition creates clarity. It doesn't. It creates dilution. Strong presence is comfortable with a single statement. Weak presence keeps talking until it feels safe. The irony is this. The more you try to secure attention, the more attention drifts away. Because attention follows structure. Short statements create structure. Long explanations dissolve it. In meetings, the person who talks the longest is rarely the one people remember. It's the one who speaks briefly and lets silence stretch. Silence makes others process. Talking too much makes others disengage. You don't lose attention because your ideas are weak. You lose it because your delivery lacks restraint. In the next part, we'll break down the second behavior that makes people mentally step past you, even when you're standing right in front of them. The second behavior that makes you easy to ignore is reacting too fast. Quick replies feel efficient. They feel sharp. They feel confident. But socially, they often signal something else. Eagerness, and eagerness lowers perceived value. When you respond immediately to everything, Every message, every comment, every challenge, you train people to see you as available. Constantly available. And constant availability removes weight. Think about it. The people whose words carry the most impact don't rush to answer. They pause. They let the question sit. They let tension build slightly. They decide. That pause communicates stability. Fast reactions communicate dependency on the moment. If someone challenges you and you instantly defend yourself, you're not leading the interaction. You're reacting to it. And reactive behavior shifts power. It signals that your emotional state is influenced by others. Once people sense that, they test it. They interrupt more. They push harder. They speak over you, not because they want to disrespect you, but because your behavior told them it's safe to push. Another form of fast reaction is laughing too quickly, agreeing too quickly, apologizing too quickly. These small reflexes feel polite, but they often communicate insecurity. When everything gets an instant response, nothing feels deliberate. And people respect deliberation, deliberate speech, deliberate emotion, deliberate silence. Being slow doesn't mean being passive, it means being controlled. When you slow your responses, people adjust their pace to you. When you speed up for everyone, they move past you. Ignored individuals are rarely invisible by nature. They're predictable, predictably reactive, predictably available, predictably eager. In the final part, we'll break down the last behavior that quietly lowers your presence. The one that feels cooperative but slowly turns you into background noise. The final behavior that makes you easy to ignore is seeking approval. Not loudly, not desperately, subtly. You soften your tone to avoid tension. You adjust your opinion to match the room. You agree before you've fully decided. It feels cooperative. It feels mature. It feels socially intelligent. But what it actually creates is predictability. And predictable people are easy to overlook. When your position shifts depending on who you're speaking to, people stop assigning weight to your words. They don't argue with you. They don't challenge you. They simply move on. Approval seeking doesn't look weak on the surface. It looks agreeable. But agreeable without boundaries becomes invisible. When you rush to reassure others, when you clarify that you didn't mean it that way, when you soften strong statements immediately after making them, you remove friction. And friction creates presence. Without friction, you blend in. Another subtle form of approval seeking is over-accommodation. You adjust your schedule instantly. You respond at any hour. You make space even when it costs you. At first, this feels generous. Over time, it becomes expected. And once something becomes expected, it loses value. The more accessible you are, the less impact you have. This doesn't mean becoming distant or arrogant. It means becoming selective. Selective with your time. Selective with your responses. Selective with your agreement. Ignored people often believe they need to be more engaging, more expressive, more available. But influence is not built through volume or visibility. It's built through boundaries. When your standards are stable, people adjust around them. When your standards bend under pressure, people step past you. The shift is subtle but powerful. Stop overtalking. Slow your reactions. Hold your positions without softening them instantly. Speak clearly. Pause deliberately. Stand still when others expect movement. Presence is not created by force. It's created by containment. And containment makes people lean in. The moment you stop chasing attention, attention begins to notice you. The moment you stop explaining yourself repeatedly, your words gain structure. The moment you stop reacting instantly, your responses gain weight. You don't become louder, you become harder to dismiss. Being ignored is rarely about others overlooking you. It's about behaviors that quietly lower your social gravity. Remove those behaviors, and the room feels different. Not because you demanded attention, but because your presence stopped leaking it.